Hey, the Craig Fahle Show on Deadline Detroit is made possible by Samaritas, which is the state's largest private foster care and adoption agency. But they do a heck of a lot more than that. They've been serving homeless families, persons with disabilities, abused and trafficked women. They're also one of the largest resettlement agencies in the state. They provide market rate and affordable housing for seniors and HUD housing for families. And they also have skilled nursing, memory care, and rehab communities in Grand Rapids, Cadillac, and Saginaw. Samaritas, thanks for their support. Great organization doing great stuff all around the state. This is the Craig Fahle Show on Deadline Detroit. Thank you very much for joining me today. And I'm very excited to have with me Dr. Nikolai Vitti, who, of course, is the superintendent of the Detroit Public Schools Community District. Dr. Vitti, we appreciate you being with us today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And let's begin with the kids, because obviously that is the sole focus of the Detroit Public Schools Community District. We had been seeing some gains in student performance within the district. I know a lot of hard work has gone into that. And I first want to get an idea from you as to what this early closure of the school year has done, what it's going to mean for student achievement, and what you need to do to make sure that we don't see any backsliding from the gains we've already made.
Yeah, well, yes, I think, as a school district, we have moved forward as quickly as possible to bring the district what I would consider back to normal. Run under emergency management and walking into the system, there was a lack of systems and processes for just about everything from curriculum selection, professional development, payroll, infrastructure, and the list goes on and on. But I think in the last 3 years, we functioned with a sense of urgency. I've been able to develop a team of those that were already here, those that I recruited, those that have always been in the city but wanted to come back to the district, with a great team of hardworking, experienced people. And we've moved forward rapidly and made a lot of progress, namely in student achievement, which obviously is most important. There's no way for me to tell you that we aren't taking a step back from a teaching and learning perspective due to COVID and not being in schools. Obviously, I supported our students not being in school when COVID hit the city. I think it was the right thing to do for children, but also for employees and the city as a whole from a health perspective. But you can't take away what happens in the classroom face to face between a teacher and students, especially our students who a number of them are below grade level. They need a lot of hands-on type of instructional support and social emotional support. And you just can't replicate that from an online perspective. I know we have done everything we can to shift in order to continue to provide education during the shutdown. But nothing can replicate what happens in a classroom face to face. So although we're still teaching our students, we're still reaching out on a social and emotional level, we are unfortunately taking a step back. I'm hopeful that we can, by July, have some level of face-to-face instruction. We'll have our devices and internet access in June, so that'll help the online learning. And I'm optimistic that we'll be back in schools after Labor Day. It will look different, and the rotations of students in schools will look different than the rest. But we're doing everything we can. But obviously, we've taken a step back, and I think the entire country has. Anyone who tells you otherwise, frankly, just isn't being honest and transparent.
Well, that brings up this question then. We obviously put so much stock in test results to gauge where students are, and what should parents and citizens in general think about as we enter the next school year, knowing that we lost a few months of instructional time, plus the summer's coming up. Should we perhaps suspend these tests this year?
Well, this year, I haven't agreed with much of what's happened through the federal government over the last couple of years. But Secretary Betsy DeVos did recommend the suspension or allow for waivers for states to apply to suspend testing this year. Michigan did that. I think it was obviously the right thing to do because we weren't offering face-to-face instruction in March, April, and the beginning of May, and that's about now, and a little couple of weeks before is when testing occurs. So it was the right thing to do, suspend testing this year. If we're in schools as we normally would be from a timeline perspective at Labor Day, I would not recommend suspending the following year. I don't think a test can never define a child's academic potential. But I do think it is a one point of reference that we should look at regarding how children are doing from an academic point of view. So I would not support suspending testing next year, but that's assuming that we would be at offering some level of face-to-face instruction.
Well, in the meantime, right now we've got distance learning going on. I've spoken to a couple of teachers in the district who say that they're very happy with the curriculum materials that they have. One thing they are concerned about, though, is the level of participation from some of the students, making sure that they are doing the assignments, having the regular meetings. What can we do to encourage parents and kids to participate more fully in this?
Yeah, and with that, I just want to highlight our district team that did a great job in really working quickly and in creating those materials, and especially want to recognize our teachers. It has not been easy to shift from face-to-face instruction to online learning. It hasn't been easy for our parents, our children, and especially our teachers. It's a whole new way of preparing and delivering a lesson, and I think overall they have done a great job in doing that. But the complaints or the concerns that you're hearing are legitimate. Not all of our students are actively participating. I would say right now the numbers look at about 60%, which it has increased over the last couple of weeks, but it's not consistent. Michigan Department of Education decided that we should not require participation, or we should require participation, but not coupled with a grade. Because obviously of the inequity linked to devices and internet access, we would we would be disproportionately negatively impacting a group of students that don't have access to a learning device or consistent internet access. So the learning that's happening is mainly enrichment and not required with a grade. And I think that has led some students not to participate, but also the reality, as you know, is that we're feeding 100,000 families a week. And if that doesn't give you a sense of the need out in the community from a food security point of view, but so just from a socioeconomic survival perspective. So it's really hard to think about requiring students to learn at home when they don't necessarily have a device, they don't necessarily have internet access. That will be solved to some extent in June. But families, many are just trying to still survive right now. So learning and online learning, unfortunately, is not a priority, but that's a reality.
Well, do you get a sense, though, that elected officials recognize the extra steps that have to be taken in a district like Detroit to make sure that kids have access to these materials? And again, you mentioned the food part. That's a huge thing. But also, again, internet access. I know that there's school buses that are going to be outfitted with mobile Wi-Fi and all sorts of things that are going to happen. These cost money. And I'm not sure that there is any push really to compensate the district in a way that you should be compared to other districts that maybe don't have the same economic problems.
No, that's well said, and that's what I've been saying for a long time. I think your original question was, do lawmakers understand? No, I mean, there's a few that may have been former teachers, a better sense of what happens in K-12, but the average lawmaker, no, has no clue what it takes to educate children at scale, or children in general. Everyone has gone to school or experienced schooling at some point, and therefore many people think that makes them an expert in the process. Very different of experiencing education as a student, as a parent, and actually educating children. Two different concepts. But no, one thing that COVID has exposed, whether you're talking about healthcare, where you're talking about job security, or in this case, the digital divide, inequity is real in our country. It's real in Michigan, and it's certainly very realistic in the city when you're looking at inequity defined by race and socioeconomic background. And the digital divide is real. Most of our parents actually have a device, but that device is for a phone or social media. It's not a learning device. You can't. It's really hard to read long passages on an iPhone, to answer passages on an iPhone, to use the device to connect with teachers. That device was created for more social media communication, not learning. So in June, our business community has stepped up with the $23 million investment, and all of our DPSCD families will receive a device and internet access for 6 months. So that will be a game changer with injecting devices and internet access. I think it not only will help online learning continue, but it also rapidly accelerates our transformation with including more technology in the learning space, and it'll empower parents to access other resources in the city and statewide. But we've been talking about inequity for a while, as a school system. Even before I came here, there's obviously clear examples of inequity, but I especially have been highlighting the fact that Detroit receives less per pupil than other districts. I mean, Birmingham, Bloomfield Hills, Southfield are examples where if you took our number of students with with the amount that they receive from the state or local property taxes, we'd have an additional $150 million a year. Imagine what we could do with $150 million a year. So that inequity has been real and certainly highlighted through the COVID experience.
Well, I mean, you hate to suggest that anything positive comes out of an experience like we're dealing with right now. However, the sunlight that has been cast upon the inequities in the system it might make people think differently about things that we saw yesterday. The letter that you and Iris Taylor, of course, the school board president, sent to the governor's office suggesting that it's time to settle this lawsuit regarding the right to literacy in the city of Detroit. Um, from your perspective, what does an equitable settlement look like in that situation? Is it just simply restoring the funding that maybe was lost during the state takeover, or is there something more that has to go into this?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of different strategies and commitments that I think have to be part of the settlement. One, I just want to I want to give honor to those that fought to have the settlement, have the lawsuit even initiate. Obviously, that happened before I became superintendent, but I have to honor the community members, attorneys, families, students, former DPS students that stepped forward to initiate the lawsuit. I will always have a great deal of respect for those individuals that were a part of that to benefit our current students and future students. So I believe, one, there has to be a long-term commitment to equity from a funding perspective. So I think that has to be part of the settlement is, beyond me, beyond the school board, the current school board, beyond the governor, how do we create a legacy of equity to ensure that when students go to school every day, regardless of the school district they go to, regardless of the zip code that they're born into or that they grow up in, that they have not only an equal but an equitable opportunity through the traditional public school system. That does not happen in Michigan. So that's one. How do you create a per pupil funding formula or a per pupil formula that gives more to those that need more, not give more to those that need less? And right now our system is not structured that way. Those that have more get more. And that's just, it's counterintuitive. And it perpetuates the inequality that we see in this country. So that's one. Two, you have to, at some level, account for facilities. When DPSCD was created, we started with what would eventually be in 5 years a $1.5 billion problem. With no clear revenue source to deal with it. Specifically, at the time DPSCD was created, it was $500 million that was needed to bring all of our buildings to where they should be from a 2020 perspective. So that has to be addressed in the settlement. Also, I believe attacking the issue of literacy also has to be part of the settlement, where investment did not happen in professional development, didn't happen with the right curriculum. Reducing class sizes, providing more one-on-one academic supports for students that were struggling. Those for me are part of the solution. So again, long-term strategy on equity, and then, paying for what didn't happen from an investment point of view in facilities and literacy, I think are important, because those two pieces also then are linked to why teachers don't come to work in Detroit, why they don't stay in Detroit, which is also then linked to why students have not been performing to their potential.
Well, this is an important time of year for a school system. Typically, this is when you're starting your recruiting efforts for new teachers. You're starting enrollment for the next kindergarten school year and getting kids settled. Look, there's going to be a ton of uncertainty here when it comes to what the charter school populations are going to be. Are some of them going to emerge from this at all? What can DPSCD do to position themselves to handle that fallout, which I think is going to be a lot more significant than people realize?
Well, we're ready. Our enrollment has been steadily increasing every year for the past 3 years. I think that's certainly a sign of of us being healthier, us gaining the trust more of Detroit families. I believe that how we have worked with our parents through this crisis will also define whether they come back to us. And I think we have done a good job of feeding families at scale for the past month. In addition, the online learning process has not been ideal, but I do think that the average parent knows that we are reaching out. We're trying to support children. I think the devices and internet access will also help in June to create a bridge between June and possibly coming in and back in after Labor Day. But if some of these smaller charter schools close, we'll be ready to absorb students. We're working on a plan right now to be even more attractive with recruiting teachers. I think, our stock is increasing from a credibility point of view right now. And that's really coming from our teachers. Our teachers are saying they feel more supported, that they feel they're part of an organization that's reform-minded, but still child-centric, still thinking about what's best for teachers while pushing them professionally at the same time. And I think teachers want to be a part of that. I think teachers want to be part of an organization that's reform-minded, that's innovative, but also cares about children, really cares about children, and isn't driven by profit. And some of the things that get in the way with what's best for children. So I'm optimistic that we'll retain our students and possibly increase our numbers. And I think we're going to continue to recruit teachers, especially when we announce a strategy to maybe make it more attractive from a salary point of view for new teachers.
Well, obviously, one of the things you did a couple of years ago is reinstate step credit for
Right.
teachers, veteran teachers, to encourage them to come back to the district. I know a couple of people who took advantage of that. That has made a big difference. I do want to give you an opportunity to talk about the teachers in the district right now and whether or not you think your parents and parents across the country are having a better understanding of what they deal with on a daily basis.
Yeah, it's it's interesting when you ask that because
You're dealing with
I
it
actually
yourself.
I actually think most of our parents, because of the socioeconomic struggles that they go through with trying to manage multiple jobs, create a schedule where they have to work, pick up kids, and I think most of our parents actually know how important their teachers are. I think some folks maybe more in the middle class, upper middle class, are getting a dose of reality of how hard it is to teach kids. But I think most of our parents actually know that. But I do think that one positive thing that has come out of this is a deeper appreciation for what teachers do, and the importance that school has in providing not only students with pure knowledge from a subject point of view, but the social emotional piece and the social interaction that students have with one another. I mean, I think that's what, now that we're using a platform called Teams, students will send me these little messages during the day. And they'll say, "Hey, Dr. Vitti," and I'll say, "Hey, how are you doing?" And they'll say, "Good." And I'll ask them how online learning is going, and they'll say, "It's good, good." But they always go back to every time, I miss my classmates. I miss my friends. And I think, that's one part that we sort of take for granted is how students develop and grow socially because they're interacting with their peers and their teachers. But I do think that most of our parents have even now a deeper appreciation for our teachers and not only for what they do in the classroom, but I think we need to really appreciate what they've been doing with online learning. We should know that as all of us are doing our jobs from home, we still have families. We have our own children that we're raising. We have extended family that we may have to care for. People have been sick and ill or just stressed out from COVID, but still our teachers still teach. And they've been overcoming hardships for a long time, but this adds to the list. But we should all take a step back and ask ourselves, moving forward, what do we learn from this? And we already talked about the equity issue, but we should also talk about how we continue to improve the professionalization of teaching and how we make it not only as important, but more important than engineering, than CEOs, from doctor, not more important than doctors, but just as important as doctors, but certainly more important than lawyers. And so those are things that I'm hoping can emerge from this through this crisis, is recognizing how instrumental they are to providing the future with an opportunity to reach their potential.
Well, one last question for you, Dr. Vitti, and I appreciate the time you've been able to give me today, is what do you need to see where you will actually be comfortable reopening the district?
Yeah, great question. So a couple things, and we're working on these plans now. One is we're probably going to go through some level of mandatory employee COVID testing. So that's one thing. Two, we're looking at opportunities to take temperatures before our employees and students come into the building. So that's another factor. I would say three, that we can ensure smaller class sizes, that we can think about having less or fewer students in the building at once, less movement from class to class, more teachers going to classes, not students coming to those classes, having a fewer number of rotations in the schedule between students and teachers. So those are some things that I think we can control. I don't believe that we're going to be in a position to say we can't go back until we have a cure. I think that would be ideal, but frankly, right now, I would say that if, let's say, and I wouldn't do this, but let's say we said we were going to open schools back up next week. And I wouldn't recommend that, and frankly, I wouldn't do it even if I were told. But if let's, for the sake of conversation, we did that, I think about half of our students would actually come to school because they're so hungry to get back into it, and parents are desperate, and that's going to become even more the need when folks have to go back to work. Especially frontline workers, which increasingly they have been working, but even more so in the next couple of weeks, likely when some of the shelter in place is lifted even more than it has over the last executive order. So, I think we're always about serving children, but we just have to serve children differently, especially to keep their safety in mind, but the safety of our employees. And I think there's a way to do that with some of the strategies that I just named.
All right. Well, we'll have to leave it right there. We will check back in with you perhaps after the school year technically would have been over, as you make preparations for the fall and we learn a little bit more. But I appreciate your time, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
All right. Dr. Nikolai Vitti, of course, Superintendent of the Detroit Public Schools Community District, joining us here on the Craig Fahle Show on Deadline Detroit.
My name's ML Elric. I'm an investigative reporter and a connoisseur of fine yogurts. I know a little bit about Detroit. I know a little bit about deadlines. And I'm asking you to become a member of DeadlineDetroit.com. Like me, I'm not asking you to do anything I wouldn't do. I'm making a monthly donation. My wife is making a monthly donation. I know that seems redundant, but they need the money, and the money goes to a good place. Getting the story out, getting the truth out. Because if we don't support local journalism, there's some people a couple blocks away from here who are going to get away with a whole bunch of stuff that's going to cost you a whole lot more than just a few bucks out of your pocket every month. Go to DeadlineDetroit.com, become a member. You'll see it's really easy at the top of the website. Give early, give often, give generously. Just give a damn. That's the best way I know how.